Season 9 of Night School is presented by the AQHA. Watch the Remington Park Futurity this Saturday at Remington Park. Keeneland, live racing runs through April 26th. Woodbine, catch live standardbred racing at Woodbine Mohawk Park Thoroughbred, opening day, April 20th. Remington Park, nearly $2 million in purses up for grabs on Saturday's Remington Park Futurity card, and Express Bet, home of the $25,000 Preakness Big Bet Sweepstakes.
Horses have off days, and by looking at them before they actually get on the racetrack, you get an initial impression of which way they're leaning.
This is going to sound crazy, but for me, it's intellectual stimulation.
Class is now in session. It's time for Night School. Here are your hosts.
Ring the bell. Night School 2019 is back in session. Season 9, I'm Jeremy Plonk from Horseplayer Now, joined as always by my sidekick, General Manager Brian W. Spencer. The topic, trainer angles. Brian, you and I have spent a lot of time talking and interviewing trainers, walking the back stretches of racetracks around the country. We'll try to put a little bit of what we've learned into knowledge at the windows for the horse players out there today.
Yeah, and Jeremy, in talking to trainers over the last decade and hearing these interviews as part of Night School, it's always interesting to see how each barn differs from the other, how each barn runs their own sort of unique operation. But at least from our perspective, one of the more interesting things, at least from a horse playing angle, is all of the similarities. So while each barn is unique in its own way, each trainer has their own program, there are certain things, I think, from the trainer angles in general that we can really lock into as far as handicapping and helping us make money.
You know, once upon a time when you were playing the races, what went on in the backstretch was kind of in the shadows. It was the dark underbelly of the racetrack. You couldn't really follow it. You kind of went with your hunches and inclinations and your own personal experience, such as, I think this trainer's really good with first-time starters because I was there last Friday when he won with a first-time starter, or I remember last summer when his first-time starters ran pretty well. But with the outreach of trainer statistics in the last 15 years or so, it has really changed the handicapping game where trainer angles have taken over as one of the most important elements in anyone's handicapping. Don't believe me? Even look at something as technical as the Ragozin figures or the Thorograph figures and how they're incorporating trainer stats into their products, even with their high performance figures that they use as a handicapping product. Trainer angles are everywhere now, and they're very important to what happens on the tote board and how handicappers are coming to their decision. So how do you come up with some of the trainer angles that you want to follow? Well, you try to get outside of the box a little bit, I think, is the way to go, because the trainer angles that everybody latches onto, Wesley Ward's really good with 2-year-olds at Keeneland. Well, of course he is, and everybody makes him 3 to 5 in every 2-year-old race. It's hard to make money on the obvious trainer angles. And with the statistics out there, Brian, you know, what we've seen is we know that horse players flock towards those statistics, and trainers are even cognizant of them as well.
Yeah, and I think you see a lot of that, as far as perhaps a little bit of the spacing of races for horses. There's a lot of worry about horses bouncing off of, big figures, whether you believe in that or not. Some people do, some people don't. But, as far as the trainers go, one of the things I do care about, you kind of made that joke about Wesley Ward, but, first-time starter numbers are very important to me. But obviously, like you said, if everybody's got the same data, being a 30% first-time out trainer doesn't help me make money if everybody else knows it. So, for me, when you're looking at some of those numbers, you don't always need to be the best guy or the best woman on the page for it to be important. If you're sending out a first-time starter and you win at 11%, great. That tells me you can win with the right first-time starter. Now it's my job to try to figure out whether this is the right kind of first-time starter for that barn.
One of the main reasons why these trainer stats have become so prevalent in handicapping is because of the volume of them. handicapping the horse races is an exercise in, short-term evaluation, small sample sizes when you talk about a racehorse. And we're in an era where horses race less than ever, right? I mean, where horses used to run 10, 12, 15 times a year, now they run 4, 6, 8, 10 times a year. You have less to evaluate with each horse. With trainers, though, and the statistics that go with them, you've got a lot bigger sample size. So now you're looking at something Todd Pletcher's tried 64 times, or something that Dale Capuano in Maryland has tried 15 times in the last, 45 days. These trainer angles and stats give people, I think, a sense of confidence that they're looking at a bigger sample size. And if you're a statistically minded person, we talk about the artistic handicappers and then the scientific handicappers. If you're a science and math person, stats matter and sample size is going to matter more to you. So I think those kind of folks are going to look at these numbers and try to go to the ones that have the largest sample sizes. The smaller sample size statistics and feels and gut feels that you have are more of, I think, what we're looking at with the artistic handicappers. And while I'm a stats guy, I'm kind of more of a trends guy than necessarily a stat. Because I think if something's been established 64 times and is a hard, fast stat, everybody kind of knows it. I want to know, like, after something's happened 3, 4, 5 times, do I have a feel for it? Does this trainer angle make sense? Why has this guy won with 3, 4, 5 of his last 10 starters in a particular category? And if I can follow that trend, I can get on it before somebody else. Because like you were saying, you're trying to find someone who is successful at a particular angle, but everybody else hasn't completely bought into it yet. You've got to be ahead of the curve in order to get the proper price. And when it comes to gambling on the horses, the price matters. The price is not everything, but it is the main thing in any handicapping endeavor. So these trainer angles are wonderful to follow in terms of having the more data. I think more data is a good thing. The trainers, on the other hand, some of them don't feel that all that data out there has made their job any easier. Owners might be pulling horses from a particular trainer because they're not winning at a higher enough percentage in a particular category, Brian. So it can be a boon for us, but it can be a bust for the horsemen themselves.
Yeah, there's a lot of moving parts in it, and we've kind of talked about the raw numbers. So-and-so is 22% in this category, but how do we get there? How do we find the things that are not quite that easy to find? And this is one of the things that I find the most interesting and difficult, but it's also how you get yourself paid if you're trying to use trainer angles in your handicapping, is figuring out when, or being able to notice when certain trainers have done something out of the ordinary. And this comes down to a lot of experience, and knowing certain trainers, knowing a certain circuit really helps a lot. I think kind of the easiest example of this probably in the whole country is Steve Asmussen working his horses. He sends out first timers that consistently have just well-spaced works, ranked 22 out of 60, nothing flashy ever, and they come out and they run lights out. That's just how Steve works his horses. Now, every now and then, you get a little freak that comes along who's been working bullets for Mr. Steve, and all of a sudden that horse jumps out because that is off the baseline for Steve Asmussen. That's an obvious big barn angle, but those are the kind of things, those deviations from any barn's baseline that you can become comfortable with finding on your own circuit, and that's where you can also get ahead of other players.
Yeah, when you say out of the norm, you mean out of their norm, right? I mean, based
Yes.
on their part. What you expect of a particular trainer, or what you've seen, or what the statistics tell you from a particular trainer. When you start to see something a little different, that's when you want to really take notice. Those workout patterns can certainly be a place like that, or different kinds of horses. Once upon a time, people told me Bill Mott couldn't win with a first-time starter, but he gets a good group of 2-year-olds, maybe a different group of owners who went to the sales, who want to emphasize something. Mott wins the first race at Saratoga for a 2-year-old. Then he wins the second race at Saratoga for a 2-year-old. You can't think anymore that Bill Mott's not going to win with a first-time starter. You've got to get ahead of that curve at some point. And maybe it's because you saw good works. Maybe it's because you saw that first one. Maybe when the first Bill Mott first-time starter of the Saratoga meet runs well, you jump on the second, third, fourth. You don't wait for the end of the meet to come along and say, okay, well, now I have a sample size big enough to understand that. Take a trainer, understand what they usually do well, And I don't care what circuit it is. I don't care if you're playing Turf Paradise, Turfway Park, Remington Park, or the big circuits, in New York. Know what your trainers do. Get to know the trainers on your circuit. And when they start doing things different than their norm and having success with it, it's a great time to take notice. Brian, you talk about red flags with particular trainers or red flags with horses. Where are you throwing the flag?
Well, one of the main things, too, is this also comes down to, for a lot of these barns, knowing what their general MO is, knowing what is normal and what looks out of the ordinary for them. Because to me, not all red flags are created equal. When I say a red flag, I'm talking about a horse who gets claimed for $20,000, goes to the bench for 90 days, and returns for $5,000. That's a red flag for any barn in the entire country. But that being said, there are some other drops where, you look at barns that churn through a lot of horses. Carl Broberg's barn, barns like that, where they're just claiming horses, they're running their volume operations. Those type of operations, the red flags don't necessarily mean the same thing because they aren't worried about losing a horse because they've got 75, 85 more just sitting around ready to run. It's very different than when a guy with 6 horses drops one of his horses in and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. That's a real red flag. And again, you've just got to know your trainers and the operations they're running to know what is a real red flag and what's not.
And keep an eye on the calendar. Remember, the beginning of a meet starts, everybody's optimistic. There's a whole condition book ahead of them, places to run their horses. They're there. They're bedded down. They're going to be a little more conservative maybe in the placement of their horses. At the end of a meet, claiming horses are expensive to ship around the country and take other places, and chances are you have a lot of claiming horses in your barn. You're going to be very bold in dropping horses at the end of a race meet, and hopefully you get a win and get the horse claimed, and then you can move to the next racetrack with less stock and less shipping costs. So Norm McKnight at Woodbine at the end of the meet, a great example of a guy who'll drop horses. Think at the end of like an Oaklawn meet in April or May, and those outfits all have to come north for the rest of the year. To get rid of some of their stock can be done in a positive manner for them by dropping their horses in class. So keep an eye on the calendar and where you are at a particular race meet. Is it at the beginning? Is it at the end? And that can give you a good look at some of the trainer angles as well. We've got trainers in night school over the years that have told us a little bit of everything, but one of the more outspoken trainers was Breeders' Cup Distaff winning trainer Tom Proctor, a winner of more than 1,000 races and $50 million among his horses for many decades. The head trainer for Glen Hill Farm, Tom Proctor, joined us in night school a few years back and shared his wisdom with us. We'll go into the night school vault and listen to Tom, and then he'll be followed by the First Lady of Night School, Caton Bredar.
Pick, bet, and cheer on live racing from Woodbine and Mohawk Park. Thoroughbred and harness action. The wagers are just the beginning. Watch award-winning broadcasts covering both breeds, incredible battles contested over the most unique grass course in North America. Experience the full field with over 130 thoroughbred and 160 live harness days. Get access to free handicapping material and join the ranks of Woodbine and Mohawk Park players from all over the globe. For more information, visit woodbine.com.
Strategize, analyze, select. Join Keeneland Select to bet on racing from around the world on your computer, tablet, or smartphone, anytime, anywhere. Featuring the best rewards in racing, free pass performances, live video, race replays, and more. Plus, Keeneland Select invests a portion of its profits back into the sport. Join Keeneland Select today and earn a $150 sign-up bonus at KeenelandSelect.com. Dedicated to the sport and dedicated to the players.
Some folks like to bet on the horses. Some like to bet on the games. Some folks like to bet on their phone. And some like to bet from their suite. So what's your best bet? All of the above. No matter how you like to bet, Remington Park is your best bet yet. With world-class horse racing, OKC's newest casino, and online suite booking now available. Remington Park, it's your best bet yet.
Hey, what's going on? Mikey here, and I'm going to tell you about an offer from my good friends at ExpressBet. Let's be honest, We know you love playing the races, but you can't always make it to the track. Sometimes life just gets in the way of a good bet. Well, what if I told you about a place where you never miss a bet and you start with house money? You'd say I'm crazy, right? Well, not at ExpressBet. Your first $100 are on them. That's right. Sign up with expressbet.com using promo code XBRadio, bet $100, and they'll deposit $100 back into your account the very next day. Hey, plus you could get an extra $25 if you use Express Fund Direct Deposit. You see what I mean? House money for betting the races. It's that easy. Check it out at expressbet.com to learn more. And don't forget to sign up with promo code XBRadio. You're gonna love it. And that's a Mikey guarantee. Must be 18 years or older and 21 years old in certain states to open an account with ExpressBet and reside in a state where such activity is legal. Void where prohibited. National Gambling Support Line 800-522-4700.
Welcome back to the show. Enjoy this classic night school clip from the vault.
Well, you know, a lot of times that switchback on distance is a very powerful deal. So, you know, they just tend to, especially going 7/8. You've had a horse run a mile and a 16th and like 6.5, 7/8. They tend to run really big. Maybe they have just a little more air. They can sustain the rally a little better than a sprinter can, even though maybe they're not a mile and a 16th horse, but you run them there a couple of times, you come back, run them 7/8, and that's what they really like to do. And, you know, and I think that's a lot to do with it. Like running a speed horse first time, going long, they'll tend to run their first race. They'll tend to be a little better than even if they don't want to run a mile, they'll run this mile two-turn race pretty good the first time you do it. I look at the horses, not so much numbers. You know, I know I'm weak first time out, but I don't have a bunch of relaunches in my barn anymore. When I had them, I was real good at it, you know, and now that I have these long-distance turf horses, yeah, my percentage is first time out's bad, but that's, you know, I know. Matter of fact, I do kind of pay attention to that and try to be a little better at it, and I know, you know, I tend to have a lot of turf horses, so I'm looking for dirt horses. When I had all the relaunches, I had turf and dirt. Now that we're breeding more and buying more turf horses, all of a sudden I'm a turf trainer. So I'm aware of it somewhat. Yeah, I think you tend to, some people tend to, and I'll probably look at it some. I mean, I don't want to be down there, because the problem with that, too, is turf racing is going to have full fields. Dirt races probably not so much, so you can't really go on that too much. And just like if you're, you know, sometimes I think trainers are a little scared about that because, you know, hey, success brings clients. And, you know, but success in big races bring more clients. And my thought is let's try to win the best races we can that this horse can do in its career. And I look at it more that way. But if I was starting out, I sure don't want to be 2 for 48. Something like that, a first year or something. I wouldn't want to do that. And, you know, some people have a habit of being able to win races and some don't, though.
Set to close out the show here, and that means it's time for a visit from Caton Bredar. And Caton, Jeremy, and I have talked about all kinds of different trainer angles, and I think, especially in this day and age, we've got some of these bigger barns, we see larger operations, and I think that trainer angles have become potentially more interesting than ever, but there are more of them than ever to sift through. So, you know, personally for you, what are some of your favorite trainer angles, and what are the things that really jump off the page for you when you see a trainer put something into action?
Well, there's one caveat about trainer angles, and I guess it's a contrarian type of trainer angle play. But that is that there are trainers who are here's my theory is that a brilliant trainer, a good horseman can get the most out of a horse regardless. It doesn't matter the category. It doesn't matter if typically they don't usually do something that you think that they're trying to do. And that is the opportunity that you sometimes have as a bettor if you can keep an open mind and believe in a trainer's ability versus believe in the stats to cash a bet. And so, for years you'll hear something about a trainer. You'll hear that Bill Mott can't train a 2-year-old, or Bill Mott will never win the Derby because he's not the type that rushes a young horse. Statistically, that has been true, but that has nothing to do with his ability as a trainer if he had a horse that was capable of being a good 2-year-old or being precocious or winning the Derby. So when I've seen first-time starters that I liked the individual horse and I saw Bill Mott was training, that was sometimes, for a lot of people, a shy away, a play against. For me, it was an opportunity because you got a better price than you normally would for a Hall of Fame horseman with a horse that looked right to be able to win. So that's where I think that we can sometimes get too caught up in statistics or trainer angles, and you almost play the anti-trainer angle the opposite way if you know the horseman. But I would also say, and this is sort of my part 2 with playing trainer angles, because we do rely on statistics a lot to see what's been the past history of that trainer in that particular situation. I think it's a mistake to go off of too broad a sampling. I think if you look at recent times, you get a much better snapshot. I rely on data that mostly takes into consideration the last 100 starters for a trainer. Now, it can break it down into category and say the last 100 first-time starters that a trainer has sent out, and that's great too. But I think by looking at more recent statistics versus looking at, something from if a trainer's been training a long, long time, 20 years ago, you get a better idea of what the barn is doing lately. For example, again, with the case of Mott, his barn has changed. The complexion of his owners has changed. The types of horses he's getting has changed. This could hold true with a trainer, and Chad Brown is probably a bad example because he seems to win with everything, but most people think of him for turf versus dirt. But that's dependent on the type of horses he's getting. As he gets more top turf horses or dirt horses or horses who are bred to be good on any surface, you're going to see his stats just as high on the dirt as you would on the turf. So I rely on statistics, but I like to rely more on recent statistics using what's happening now or what's been happening more lately. I also like to rely on my knowledge of the trainer and in watching him over the years and what he's been able to accomplish. And, there are trainers who don't usually win first time out, but every once in a while you might see a variance in the workout tab or, again, the breeding of the horse. Maybe it's from a different owner that they've ever had a connection with. So I'm looking for the reasons why the stat won't necessarily hold true or why this would be the exception to the rule. But I do rely on trainer stats a lot or trainers' angles because I think that at the end of the day, that's one of the few variables that not everybody will interpret exactly the same, and that might give me an edge. I don't like to typecast trainers. I prefer to look at the horse and then determine whether the trainer would be, what was the trainer trying to accomplish in the workout pattern, say with a first-time starter, or when they're moving from turf to dirt. In the past, why does a trainer make that move? Has it been successful? Yes, that comes into play. But you've got to try to think outside the box a little bit into the specific situation that you're looking at for that day. And Carl Nafsker was brilliant at taking horses from turf to dirt and back and forth. Generally, as a rule, I don't like that angle, horses moving back to the dirt after they've been on the grass. I just don't think that if they've shown an affinity for one surface, they necessarily show it again for the same surface. But Carl was one who did it with great success. For example, winning the Breeders' Cup Classic with a horse that he moved from the turf back to the main track. So, you do have to do your homework or know your trainer's patterns and see what has worked for them. And certainly when it has worked in the past, then it's something you can jump into enthusiastically.
And Caton building a really good point there that it's not always about buying into the stats. Sometimes it's about trying to find a way around them and still finding a winning horse. So there's a look at some of our top trainer angles and where we like to and don't like to focus on trainers. We're going to be back next week with a lesson on bankrolls. We'll talk to you again next weekend as we head towards the middle of the first semester here on Season 9 of Night School.
next on FAQ 60. Favorites. We all have our favorites in life, and horse players are no different. But in racing terms, the favorite is the horse with the most money bet on it to win. So while a favorite has popularity, it often has a low payoff, most often in the $3 to $6 range for a $2 bet. The good news is that favorites win about 40% of the time in American quarter horse racing, a stronger percentage than thoroughbred racing, which has about 36% winning favorites overall. If you can't beat the favorites and don't want to accept a short win price, join them. That's why exotic wagers were created. Keying the favorite in bets like the exacta, trifecta, pick 3, or pick 4 can still lead to big returns. This FAQ 60 is brought to you by AQHA Racing and Horse Player Now.
Enjoyed tonight's episode? Check out hundreds of past archives at horseplayernow.com.